Hi, welcome to day one on Lance Code and Create. This is the first week, and during this week, we are going to learn how to structure our HTML documents using HTML. But before that, let's have a detour on web development and HTML. It is important that we understand what web development is all about because we are about to become web developers. So let's start by understanding what that is and then discover what HTML is. From there, we'll be able to learn how to structure HTML documents properly. So without any hesitation, let's move on to the board. So to start, we'll start from the term web development. Generally, the term web development stands for a career or a job that allows you to build applications or websites using web technologies. So basically, web development is actually a software development field, but which focuses or emphasizes or uses web technologies. And that brings us to the question of what actually is the web. We would answer this question, but before that, I would like us to understand something which supports the web. The web is actually under something which is the internet. So I made some sketches here, right here, to try to explain to you what the internet actually is and how the web actually is represented on the internet. What actually is that web we are talking about, and why do we have to have special type of software developers for the web? So let's look at it. This is a basic network, right? I'm just assuming you might have some basics on the networking. And networking is basically connecting one or two or one or more computers. So in this basic network, which we call a local area network here, you can see a laptop, a desktop, and then a cell phone all connected to a router in different ways. The desktop and the laptop are connected using network wires, and the cell phone uses the Wi-Fi to connect to the router. So within this local area network, these three devices can exchange information, and this is what we call a network. And when the network is just a local network to an office, to an institution, to a house, it becomes what we call a local area network. So we have a local network area, and as you could imagine, this could happen to only not one person or one company. It can be happening in different organizations. So we can assume we have an organization or a household A here, then another organization or household B here, and that goes on. Individually, they can't exchange between these two circles. So something must be done to allow them to exchange. So that's how we have these various cells, we can call them cells, these little local area networks all around the world. So if we look at this whole picture now, we can assume this area here is somewhere maybe in Europe, this area is somewhere in Russia, this is somewhere here in Africa, this is somewhere here in the Americas. So you can see these networks exist individually. These cells exist individually all over the world, and there are more than this, right? But if we get a chance to connect any of these cells with another cell, like in this situation, because of the distance that separates these two cells, we cannot use cables because that would be super expensive and probably slower. So the best way is to use Wi-Fi communications. So that's how we can use these giant antennas to transmit the signals for on far distances. So this is how we can connect to different cells, and this can even happen in the same country. I mean, you can see that with our telecommunication networks that use these giant antennas to transmit information across our countries. So when that happens, like in this area now, we have built what we call a wide area network, or WAN. So that becomes a wide area network. So now we have a wide area network that groups in our scenario here, a European network, LAN, and then a Russian LAN. And then at the other side, we have the Americas LANs, right? So how do we communicate? How do we communicate between these two regions? And yes, we can still use the Wi-Fi stuff, but that is going to be difficult to happen because these two continents, these two areas are separated by a giant ocean, and planting all these antennas would be almost impossible. I guess it was impossible. That's why it is not done. So the best option that came out, as far as I know, is to use what we call the fiber optic, and the fiber optic is a giant fiber, so a giant plastic. I will say a giant cover of a tiny plastic. So basically, it is a small, tiny plastic, and which is now covered by giant stuff to protect it, and then it goes across the ocean. So the signal is sent as light through that little plastic, and then the signal is interpreted as binary data and so on. That's how information is now transmitted from one continent to another continent. And these cables are usually called the submarine cables. So when one submarine cable has an issue, an entire region can be cut off of the internet and so on. So that's how we get networks connected. And when that happens, when networks connect to networks, we speak of internetworking. Internetworking. So here you can see the name internet working. So yes, kind of. So we speak of internet working. That's how the internet is actually born. So the internet is just a giant network of networks. So why are we interested in this right now? So initially when the internet was built, or when the internet started growing, basically people started connecting to this network and connecting their local area networks to this network and so on. So as it started growing, around 1995, I guess somebody thought of something, a different way of sharing files, because prior to that, people used to use emails, FTPs, and Usenets to exchange information. So this man called Tim Berners-Lee, if I say the name right, thought of a different way. So that's very important, a way of sharing information. So it thought of a way of sharing information. So let me note that, a way of sharing information, which it dubbed the World Wide Web, right? And why is it called the World Wide Web? So the principle it came up with is that, one, every single information, the principle it came up with, the first one is that you create a different format of documents, a different format of information, let's say that way. So a special format of information. So whatever information we want to exchange, it should follow that particular format, or it should be encompassed inside that particular format. So it is like something like, let's assume you are like, okay, everybody who wants to send a message nowadays should use a white envelope. So that's kind of the format, right? So everybody should use that white envelope if you want to send any information. So that's the first thing he thought about. Then the second thing is it thought about was that, okay, in order to add to the format, we need to set special extensions to this type of documents. So, and the extensions were called HTML. We'll get back to that right now. HTML or HTM and so. And then the next thing is, unlike the usual documents, which are usually typed through type machines, or even through the computers and printed, or through applications like Microsoft Word, where you could type text. just right from on the graphical user interface. This one, he thought, no, the document content should be structured using a particular language called HTML. That's where we are getting to HTML. So this language should be used to format, to define the content of the document, right? It should be used to mark every single part of the document on what that part should be, or how that part should behave, or how that part should look like. So basically, if you were to use Microsoft Word and make a text bold, you would highlight the text and then go and click on the B button. So he says, no, we won't do that. We'll rather create some kind of character that we'll call something like this. And then anytime we want to make a text bold, we'll just cover it or surround it with that particular character called B. Yes, I'm just writing it as such for now. We'll see later on how that is done. So that goes on for every single part of the document, starting from the layout of the document, which is the structure, like the various sections of documents, various formatting of various parts of the text, handling media, and so on. And that is another important part of that particular document format we will see right now. Then the next thing he thought about was what we call the uniform, or primarily formerly called universal resource locator. So uniform resource locator. So what he says is that, okay, if we are to create a document of such structure, that document should be uniquely identified on the whole internet. So this is what we call the document. So when we build a file of such structure, we call it a document. And since it is a document that is defined by the web's rules, so we call it a web document. So I'll be using this term most often. So since it is a file with such format and such rules, it should be unique everywhere. So that being said, this is a web server connected to this local area network in the Americas. So inside this server, we create a file and create a file and we call it, let's say, P, and we give it the extension. Let me zoom this, and we give it the extension of HTML, and that means we are following the principles defined for the web. So to format the content of the file, we probably type this inside. That makes it a web document, right? So it says this document P in this server, let's assume this server's IP address is 1, 2, 3, 5. Let's assume that. So it says that, okay, whenever we want to access a web file, we should always target it through the server's IP, that's the machine on which it is located, and then add a forward slash, add the extension, the file, and then its extension. And that, which is the 1, 2, 3, and 5, right? So we write the IP address, forward slash, then we do that. But before that too, we should specify something else, which is the HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So these documents we created right now are also called hypertext documents. The reason being so, like I mentioned earlier, there are some advantages about this type of document. It wouldn't just be about their structure, their aesthetics, but it is also about the dynamics these types of documents are meant to bring, or they are meant to offer. So one of these dynamics, one of these advantages are the interactivity. So like the interactivity. So this document, unlike ordinary papers, where once the document is printed, it is printed, everything is static, it remains there. Interactivity. This word is becoming long for me to write. Right. So on a web document, that's a document created for the web protocol or principles, you can actually interact with the content. That's from your computer screen. You can interact with the content. That's very important. An example of interaction here is like we could add a button on that content and allow you to click on that button, right? So that's the interactivity we are talking about there. And the other advantage is the linking. The linking. What it means is if you are to have a book which has 100 pages and you are moving from, let's say, page 2 to page 20, you have to flip all the pages between 2 and 20 before you can reach that 20th page. Yes, you might kind of gather some other pages at the same time, but it's still the same process, just done quickly. So it is a bit hard. But the web documents give us the chance to kind of jump many documents and then link one document to another. So from one document, you can actually give the option to one person to jump so many documents and then go and visit another document far away from these ones. And now where this becomes interesting is here in our case, if you have these documents, let's assume we have another document called x.html, and then I decided to link this X and HTML that is on the same server. That is still cool, but I could still have the server somewhere. Let's assume in MTN's warehouses here. By the way, I'm not sponsored by MTN. I just love MTN. So let's assume MTN servers here, which with the IP address 1, 4, and 6 or 5, whatever, then some 4 here again, / has another HTML document here called y.html. So this, we could decide to link this file here to another file in the Americas. All we have to do, let's say in the file P, is to say that we want to link the file located in the IP address so and / y.html, and it will still work. And that is the key. That's the beauty. It's one of the most powerful features of the web or web documents. Another thing we can look at, which we already dissected here, is the structure, right? And that is going to be the emphasis of our study in this particular week of this bootcamp. So the structure it gives, there's a rule to follow in how to structure these web documents. And then aside that, and that brings us to the third powerful thing, the fifth powerful thing that the web offers, which is the browsers. So the browser is actually a software meant to interpret the HTML, to interpret the language used to define, to structure any web document. So let's say this B and B stuff here, how do we read it? If you pass this to Microsoft Word will bring you the exact same thing. But if you open a document like p.html using a browser like this, then the browser will rather bring you the word bold in bold. So it will bring out the word bold as in bold in this case, right? So our job as web developers is to understand how these documents are meant. So before we go deep into it, and as I was exploring how the web documents are being accessed through the network, through the IP addresses and so, this rule that defines how files can be traced through their URLs throughout the internet network. Now you realize the internet network is actually a support. It's the stream through which documents located in various locations in various servers around the globe can be interconnected, can be linked to each other, and allow people to move from one file or from one document to another, or what we call to navigate. Right? So the internet is that support. Now this rule that allows us to now jump from one file to another is what we call the hypertext transfer protocol. So hypertext being the web documents, and the web documents are called hypertext simply because they have these hyperlinks. This linking system is called the hyperlinks. So hypertext is a web document basically. So hypertext transfer protocol. So this to say the protocol used to transfer web documents, and that protocol uses what we call the IP addresses, the IP protocol, which already existed with the internet, by the way. So uses the internet, the IP protocol, to be able to locate files uniquely into what we call URLs. If this is understood, then let's go back. We now understand what the web is, which is a technology that flies or swims on the internet to allow sharing of files. And why is that important for us as web developers? How is that helping? How is that going to help us to understand what the web is? I didn't know I did all this stuff inside this circle. So let me remove that. So how is that going to help us? So earlier on, we said that web development is also software development, but using web technologies. So that means to be a web developer is somebody to understand who understands what HTML is. HTML being the language, hypertext markup language. So we said we mark up the document. So every single portion of our web documents, we mark them up with some kind of special characters to say this part of the character will be bold, this part of the character will be italic, this part of the document, sorry, is going to be probably green or so on. So we mark up the document with these particular characters. So the language we use, like I mentioned earlier with the B stuff, is called the HTML language. So as a web developer or a software developer that uses web technologies, it is important that you understand these various parts of the web. So you must know these various parts of the web, which you mentioned earlier. You must be conversant with these areas of the web. So the format of the document, the extensions, without breaking anything, the HTML, which is the hypertext markup language, the URLs, the HTTP, you must understand all these things. So when you are studying web development, it's basically you studying all this stuff. Some way, somehow, it's about you studying all this stuff. But in this course, we decided to focus mainly on learning the language used in structuring all these HTML documents, which is the HTML. So in the next chapter, which is day 2, we are going to actually learn what the HTML is all about, and what we need to know about HTML. We'll start writing our first HTML. So basically, we'll start creating our first web documents and see how we do that, how we run them, how we see the result, how we put some HTML to see the effect it gives. So thank you so much for joining this bootcamp again. Stick around for more on some content. Thank you. Do not forget to subscribe, like the video, share with your friends and families. Thank you.